Voices of the Forgotten. In a small, nameless village nestled deep within a forest, life moved slowly. The villagers, though few, lived simple lives, farming the land and raising their families. But there was one thing that set this village apart from all others: the strange whispers that could be heard on still, moonlit nights. For generations, the villagers spoke of the voices of the forgotten, distant murmurs that floated through the air when the winds were calm, and the stars twinkled like diamonds in the sky. These voices, they said, were the souls of those long lost to time. People who had once lived in the village, their lives now reduced to whispers carried on the breeze. Many villagers feared the voices, believing them to be curses or warnings from the dead. The elders, however, said the voices were not to be feared. They were the echoes of lives that had been forgotten, and all they wanted was to be remembered. Among those who lived in the village was a young woman named Ilara. Unlike the others, she didn't fear the voices. She had always been drawn to them, ever since she was a child. As a girl, she would sit outside her home at night, listening to the faint murmur of the voices and wondering who they belonged to and what they were saying. One evening, after a particularly hard day in the fields, Ilara found herself once again sitting beneath the old oak tree at the edge of the village, staring up at the full moon. The air was still, the kind of stillness that came before the voices would speak. Sure enough, the whispers began. But tonight, something was different. The voices were louder, clearer than ever before. Ilara, one of the voices called, and she sat up, her heart racing. No voice had ever spoken her name. Ilara, it repeated, more urgently. You must listen. Frightened but curious, Ilara stood and walked deeper into the forest, following the whispers as they grew stronger. The trees seemed to bend around her, guiding her path. After what felt like hours, she arrived at a clearing she had never seen before. At its center stood a crumbling stone monument, weathered by time and overgrown with moss. The voices were all around her now, a cacophony of murmurs filling the air. Suddenly, one voice rose above the rest. "We are the forgotten," it said. "We once lived here, in this village, but our names and stories have been lost. We only want to be remembered." Ilara approached the monument and knelt before it, brushing away the vines that had overtaken its surface. Beneath the greenery, she uncovered faint carvings, names, dates, and symbols that had long faded into obscurity. "What must I do?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Speak our names," the voice replied. "Tell our stories, and we will no longer be forgotten." For the next several nights, Ilara returned to the monument, listening to the voices and learning their stories. There was Marin, the healer who had cured the village of a deadly plague, but had died young, her sacrifice forgotten. There was Doran, the blacksmith who had forged the village's first tools, but whose name had been lost to history. And there was Isla, the child who had never grown old, taken by a mysterious illness before her time. One by one, Ilara recited their names to the village. She told their stories to anyone who would listen, writing them down in a book that she carried with her at all times. At first, the villagers were skeptical, but as the stories spread, something miraculous happened. The voices began to fade, not in anger, but in peace. Their whispers became softer, more content, until finally they were gone. Years passed, and Ilara grew old, but she never stopped telling the stories of the forgotten. The village thrived, and the whispers never returned. But the monument in the forest remained, now free from vines and neglect, a reminder that no one's life was truly forgotten as long as their story was told. And so, Ilara's name joined the others in the book she had kept, her own story now part of the village's history, to be remembered for generations to come.